My best friend's betrayal at work cost me more than I expected. My best friend Amy looked me dead in the eye and said, "I can't help that I'm just better at this job than you are." The entire conference room went silent. I felt something inside me break, not just crack, but completely shatter. But I kept my face neutral, nodded professionally, and said, "Congratulations on your promotion." What she didn't know was that I had already made a decision that would change both our lives forever. Let me back up 6 months. Amy Rod and I had been best friends since college. We started at Peterson and Associates Marketing on the same day, sat in adjacent cubicles, grabbed lunch together every day, and complained about our boss Karen's impossible deadlines over drinks every Friday. We were the dynamic duo, the ones everyone knew came as a package deal. When one of us succeeded, we both celebrated. When one of us struggled, we had each other's backs. Or so I thought. Amy was brilliant, don't get me wrong. She had this natural charisma that made clients love her instantly. But I was the one who did the research, crafted the strategies, and stayed late perfecting every presentation. We complemented each other perfectly. She was the face, I was the brain. It worked beautifully for 2 years. The trouble started when our department head, Mr. Peterson himself, announced he was creating a new senior creative director position. It was the promotion we'd both been dreaming of, corner office, 6-figure salary, and the creative freedom we'd been craving. The catch: only one of us would get it. "We should work together on this," Amy said when we first heard the news. "Pool our resources, you know? Best friends supporting each other no matter what happens." I was naive enough to believe her. For 3 months, we collaborated on our individual pitches. I shared my market research, my client insights, even my innovative campaign ideas. Amy shared her presentation tips and introduced me to potential networking contacts. We practiced our pitches together, gave each other feedback, and promised that whoever got the job would make sure the other person got the next big opportunity. The heartbreak started small. I noticed Amy staying late more often, but when I offered to help, she'd wave me off. "Just tweaking some presentation slides," she'd say with a smile that seemed a little too bright. I found out from Kevin in IT that she'd been requesting additional access to client files for accounts I'd been working on. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. "Oh, you know how paranoid IT gets. I was just trying to get some background info." The real gut punch came the week before our final presentations. I was working late, alone in the office, when I decided to grab a coffee from the break room. That's when I overheard Amy on the phone in the empty conference room. Her voice carried through the thin walls. "Trust me, Mom, this promotion is already mine," she was saying. "I've been working on this for months. You should see the campaign concepts I've developed. They're revolutionary. Laura's sweet, but she's just not executive material. She's more of a behind-the-scenes type, you know?" My coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. Revolutionary campaign concepts? Those were my concepts. My research. My late nights and weekend work. I stood there among the broken ceramic pieces, realizing that my best friend had been systematically stealing my work for months. But the betrayal wasn't complete yet. The following Monday, we both gave our final presentations to the executive team. I went first, presenting the backup strategies I'd kept to myself. They were good, but not my best work. I'd given my best ideas to Amy, thinking we were still a team. Then Amy presented, and there, projected on the conference room screen, were my strategies. My research. My innovative multi-platform campaign for the Henderson account that I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting. She presented them with such confidence, such ownership, that for a moment I actually doubted myself. Had these been her ideas all along? But then she got to the demographic analysis for the Peterson automotive account, and I knew beyond any doubt. The data she was presenting came from a survey I'd conducted personally, walking through downtown Portland for 3 days interviewing potential customers. I had blisters on my feet for a week. She'd never even seen the raw data. When she finished, the executives were impressed. Mr. Peterson himself was nodding appreciatively. "Brilliant work, Amy. Truly innovative approach." That's when she delivered the line that ended our friendship. "I can't help that I'm just better at this job than you are." She said it like she was being humble, like it was just a fact of nature rather than the result of months of calculated theft. The room erupted in polite applause. Amy beamed, and I felt something fundamental die inside me. But here's what Amy didn't know. I'm not just creative, I'm methodical. Every email, every file share, every late-night collaboration session, I had documented everything. Not because I suspected her, but because I'm obsessively organized. My dad always said, "Keep records of everything, sweetie. You never know when you'll need them." 3 days after Amy got the promotion, I requested a meeting with Mr. Peterson. I walked into his office with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Inside were printed emails, time-stamped file modifications, and photo evidence of my original handwritten notes that predated every original idea Amy had presented. "Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need to show you something important about the Henderson campaign strategy." It took him exactly 17 minutes to understand what had happened. His face went from confusion to concern to barely controlled rage. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "Months," I replied. "I have documentation going back to the beginning of the promotion process." Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair, looking older than his 63 years. "Laura, this is corporate fraud. Amy could be terminated for this. We could face legal issues with clients if they discover their strategies were developed through questionable means." I had thought about this moment for 3 sleepless nights. "I understand, sir. I'm not looking for revenge. I just want the truth to be known." What happened next was swift and decisive. Amy was called into Peterson's office that afternoon. I don't know the exact details of their conversation, but I heard her voice through the wall, going from confused to defensive to desperate in the span of 20 minutes. She was terminated that day. The promotion was offered to me the following week, along with a formal apology from the company and a promise to review their intellectual property protection policies. I accepted the position, but the victory felt hollow. I had gotten what I wanted, but I had lost something more important in the process. The aftermath was brutal in ways I hadn't expected. Amy called me crying that first night, claiming she hadn't meant for things to go so far, that she'd panicked and made bad decisions. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to go back to how things used to be. But I kept thinking about that phone call I'd overheard, about the calculated way she'd stolen months of my work, and I knew there was no going back. Our mutual friends were forced to choose sides, and the friend group we'd built over 5 years disintegrated. Some people believed Amy's version, that I had sabotaged her out of jealousy. Others saw the evidence for what it was. Most just wanted to avoid the drama entirely. The loneliness was crushing. I'd sit in my new corner office, surrounded by the success I'd worked so hard for, and feel completely empty. Every achievement felt tainted by the loss of the person I'd thought would celebrate it with me. I started bringing lunch to work instead of going to our old spots downtown, because every restaurant held memories of Amy and me laughing over shared jokes and impossible clients. The worst part was the self-doubt that crept in during those first few weeks. At 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling of my apartment, I'd replay every moment of our friendship. Had I been blind to who she really was all along? Were there signs I'd missed? I remembered the time in college when she'd submitted my economics paper as her own rough draft, claiming she'd accidentally grabbed the wrong file. I'd laughed it off then, helped her write a new version. How many other red flags had I dismissed as innocent mistakes? My mom called one evening after I'd skipped another family dinner. "Laura, honey, you sound different." "Hello. I'm fine, Mom. Just adjusting to the new position." "This is about Amy, isn't it?" I broke down then, sobbing into the phone like I was 16 again. I don't know how to trust my own judgment anymore. If I could be so wrong about someone I talked to every single day for 5 years, how can I trust anyone? Mom was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stuck with me. "Sweetheart, the fact that you trusted so completely doesn't make you naive. It makes you the kind of person worth knowing. Don't let her betrayal change that beautiful part of who you are." But I did change, at least initially. I became hyper-vigilant about everything. I started keeping my office door closed, stopped sharing preliminary ideas in meetings, and analyzed every friendly gesture from colleagues for hidden motives. The paranoia was exhausting, but it felt safer than being vulnerable again. The breaking point came during a client presentation 3 weeks into my new role. I was pitching alone for the first time, presenting a campaign I'd developed entirely by myself. Halfway through, I caught myself glancing around the room, waiting for someone to accuse me of stealing ideas, to expose me as a fraud. My voice started shaking, and I could see confusion on the clients' faces. I excused myself for a bathroom break and had a full panic attack in the stall. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely dial my therapist's emergency number. Dr. Chun had been helping me process the betrayal, but this was the first time the trauma had interfered with my work. "Laura," she said when I called, "you're experiencing hypervigilance. It's normal after betrayal trauma, but we can't let it control your life. Can you come in today?" That session changed everything. Dr. Chin helped me understand that Amy's betrayal said nothing about my worth or my judgment. It revealed her character, not mine. "You trusted appropriately," she explained. "Amy violated that trust inappropriately. That's on her, not you. But here's what saved me. About a month into my new role, I was assigned a junior associate fresh out of college. His name was Marcus, and he reminded me of myself 2 years ago, eager, hardworking, and slightly overwhelmed by the corporate world. "I don't really know what I'm doing," he admitted during our first one-on-one meeting. "Everyone else seems so confident and put together." "That's just an act," I told him. "Half of succeeding in this business is pretending you know what you're doing until you actually figure it out." Working with Marcus reminded me why I loved this job in the first place. Not for the politics or the competition, but for the pure joy of creating something that connects with people. We started collaborating on campaigns, and I found myself energized in ways I hadn't felt in months. But it wasn't easy at first. The walls I'd built were thick, and Marcus noticed my hesitancy to fully engage. During our third week working together, he knocked on my office door with a concerned expression. "Laura, can I ask you something? Have I done something wrong? You seem like you're holding back, like you don't trust me with the real work." His directness caught me off guard. Amy would have never been so honest about interpersonal dynamics. She preferred subtle manipulation to clear communication. I realized this was a moment of choice. I could continue hiding behind my defenses, or I could take a calculated risk on authentic connection. "Marcus, sit down. I need to tell you something about why I might seem guarded." I told him about Amy, about the betrayal, about how it had shattered my ability to trust colleagues. I watched his face carefully as I spoke, looking for any sign of judgment or opportunistic calculation. Instead, I saw genuine empathy and something else, recognition. "Laura, I had something similar happen in my previous internship," he said quietly. "Not as severe as what you experienced, but enough to understand how it messes with your head. I've been wondering why such a successful creative director seemed so isolated." That conversation marked a turning point. Marcus had fresh perspectives that challenged my thinking, but unlike Amy, he gave credit where credit was due. When he built on one of my ideas, he acknowledged it explicitly. Building off Laura's insight about demographic targeting, he'd say in meetings, when I refined one of his concepts, he was grateful rather than threatened. "Laura helped me see the blind spots in my initial approach," he'd explain to clients. It was what partnership was supposed to feel like, but it took months for me to fully believe it was real. I found myself testing him in small ways, sharing incomplete ideas to see if he'd claim them, giving him opportunities to take credit for successes. He passed every test without even knowing he was being tested. One evening, we were working late on a pitch for a major retail client. I had developed what I thought was a brilliant cross-platform strategy, but something felt missing. Instead of hoarding the idea until it was perfect, I decided to trust Marcus with it. "I have this concept," I said, pulling up my rough notes, "but I'm stuck on the execution. Want to brainstorm?" For the next 3 hours, we built on each other's ideas seamlessly. Marcus would suggest a modification that sparked a new direction in my thinking. I'd propose an alternative approach that opened up possibilities he hadn't considered. By midnight, we had something extraordinary, a campaign that was genuinely better than anything either of us could have created alone. "This is incredible," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. "We make a great team." Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. There was no calculation there, no mental note-taking about which ideas he could claim later. Just genuine excitement about collaborative creation. "We do," I agreed, and for the first time in months, I meant it completely. 6 months later, our campaign for a local nonprofit won a regional marketing award. As I stood on stage accepting the recognition, with Marcus beaming in the audience, I realized something profound. I was happier than I had been in years. The betrayal that had devastated me had also freed me from a toxic dynamic I hadn't even recognized. Amy reached out a few times over those months, usually after a few drinks based on the timestamps of her texts. She'd landed a job at a smaller firm, but word had gotten around in our industry circles. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild in professional networks. The first message came 3 months after she'd been fired. "Laura, I keep trying to write this text and I don't know what to say. I fucked up. I know that. But I miss talking to you every day." I stared at that message for hours before responding. "Amy, I needed time to process what happened. I'm not ready to talk yet." But she kept trying. Long, rambling messages about how the pressure had gotten to her, how she'd made mistakes but never meant to hurt me. The texts revealed more about her mindset than any conversation we'd ever had. She talked about the betrayal like it was a series of small, innocent decisions that had snowballed, conveniently omitting the calculated planning I'd documented. The message that broke my heart came 6 months later. I saw your campaign for Henderson Industries won the regional award. I helped develop those strategies, remember? We used to celebrate each other's wins. Now I'm just watching from the outside. The audacity was breathtaking. Even in her apology texts, she was still trying to claim ownership of my work. I realized then that Amy hadn't learned anything from the experience. She still saw herself as the victim of circumstances, rather than the architect of her own downfall. I miss you, she texted one Friday night after our campaign had been featured in Marketing Today magazine. I know I messed up, but we were best friends for 5 years. Doesn't that count for something? I stared at that message for a long time, remembering all the moments I'd treasured. Late nights brainstorming in college, celebrating each other's job offers, being each other's plus ones at family events. But I also remembered that phone call I'd overheard, the casual way she dismissed me as behind-the-scenes type, and I understood that the Amy I'd loved had never really existed. I finally responded, "Best friends don't steal each other's work over months of calculated planning. Best friends don't betray trust for personal gain. The 5 years we had were real for me, but apparently they meant something different to you. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it can't be with me." She stopped texting after that, but the mutual friends who still followed both of us on social media kept me updated despite my requests not to. Amy was struggling more than I'd expected. The marketing world in Portland was smaller than it seemed, and her reputation had been permanently damaged. She'd had to take a position at a much smaller firm for significantly less money, and even there, she was on thin ice. Part of me felt guilty about that. The part of me that remembered loving her as a friend wondered if I'd been too harsh, if I should have given her a second chance. But Dr. Chen helped me work through those feelings. "Laura," she said during one of our sessions, "you can have compassion for Amy's situation without taking responsibility for the consequences of her choices. You didn't ruin her career, she did that herself. You just refused to let her continue ruining yours." A year later, I was promoted again to creative director for the entire Pacific Northwest division. Marcus came with me as my senior associate, and we've built a team that operates on the radical concept of mutual respect and shared success. I learned something valuable from Amy's betrayal. Sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the most, but that doesn't mean you should stop trusting entirely. It means you should trust more carefully and value the people who prove themselves worthy of that trust. The scar from that friendship is still there. I'm more cautious now about sharing ideas before they're fully developed. I watch for signs of competitive behavior in colleagues. But I'm also more appreciative of genuine partnerships when I find them. Last month, I ran into Amy at an industry conference. She looked good, professionally dressed and confident as always. We nodded politely at each other from across the room, like acquaintances rather than former best friends. She was there representing her new company, pitching for the same client we were pursuing. Our teams presented on consecutive days. When the client announced they were going with our campaign, I felt a moment of vindication. Not because Amy had lost, but because the work that won was genuinely collaborative, built on trust and mutual respect, rather than theft and betrayal. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had confronted her directly instead of going to Peterson. Would our friendship have survived? Could we have worked through it? But then I remember that phone call I overheard, the casual dismissal in her voice when she called me behind-the-scenes type, and I know that the Amy I thought I knew never really existed. The hardest lesson I learned is that betrayal isn't just about what someone takes from you. It's about discovering that your perception of reality was completely wrong. The friendship I mourned wasn't real. The collaboration I valued was one-sided. The trust one gave was never reciprocated. But here's what I've gained. I know my own worth now, independent of anyone else's validation. I've learned to document my contributions not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. Most importantly, I've discovered that real success isn't about individual achievement. It's about lifting others up while they lift you up in return. Marcus was promoted to senior creative director last month. At his celebration party, he raised his glass and said, "To Laura, who taught me that the best leaders create more leaders, not followers." That toast meant more to me than any individual award I've ever won. Because it proved that the opposite of betrayal isn't revenge. It's building something better, something based on truth and mutual respect. Amy taught me what friendship isn't. Marcus and my team have shown me what true collaboration looks like. Both lessons were necessary, even if one was more painful than the other. I still think about that moment in the conference room sometimes, when Amy looked at me and claimed she was simply better at the job. She was wrong about that. She wasn't better at the job, she was just better at taking credit for other people's work. There's a difference, and the market has a way of revealing which skill is more valuable in the long run. These days, my corner office has photos from team celebrations, awards we've won together, and thank you notes from clients whose campaigns exceeded their expectations. It's a monument not to individual achievement, but to what happens when talented people genuinely support each other. And sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing campaign proposals from my team, I'm grateful for Amy's betrayal. It forced me to find my own strength, to build relationships based on honesty rather than convenience, and to understand that some losses are actually victories in disguise. The promotion did change everything, just not in the way any of us expected.